we're gonna go to mod C, but we're just gonna low-key have a 2-minute break because there is so much in here and I feel so bad like dumping all of this on you. So if anybody does have any questions, go to the live chat. I'm just gonna quickly drink some water before we jump into mod C because I really want to look into mod C and I kept it last, but I tried to get through the others only because mod C, yeah, like I said, not many people like it. I'm definitely not a fan, but I really did improve from my internal to my trials and felt a lot more confident with it for HSC, and I want to help you guys feel like that as well. So we will get started on that. Sorry guys, please don't look in the corner and watch me try. Anyways, let's get started. We'll just start with some light work because it's going to get a bit much as we talk about discursives and get really into it. Craft of writing, guys, it's a wild card. Now um for the other modules, you know you're going to get a 20-mark essay. You know you're going to get a 20-mark essay. Same for the short answers. You know you're going to get 6-marker here, 3-marker there. But mainly for the essays, you know that you are 100% going to get the 20-mark essay. You know you're going to get an essay. You don't know what the question's going to be, but you know you're going to get marked with a 20-mark essay. We can't say the same thing for mod C. And what I do want to do is quickly bring up some class questions just to show you what they can do. What they can do is they can give you 12-mark creative discursive and then 8-mark reflection. So they did 1 year. They can give you 10-mark creative, 10-mark reflection. Again, this is another 12-8, and I think that was the last out of our questions. But there also is the case that they give you a straight 20 marker, 20-mark creative or discursive. So why they do that, they do it on purpose because the module before it was called Discovery and a lot of people were memorizing their creative pieces. So they were like, you know what, we're going to come up with the craft of writing, which is all about crafting, and is really trying to stray away from memorizing. And it's not that you can't memorize a story. I memorized a story. I kind of had one piece, but what I did to get around this wild card, and it worked so well, is that I had like my base piece, and I think my base piece was like 750 words, which is how much you'd need for like a 15 marker. And then I had the same piece but a 500-word version, so I literally just copied and pasted it and got rid of one of the sections, like one of the like extra facts that I put in to kind of like develop a characterization. Because if I got a 10 marker, I'm not going to write 750 words. If I get a 10 marker, I can get away with only writing 500 words. So why would I rush my timing and like risk not finishing when I can just get the same, and I can get like exactly the same mark writing less. So I had a 10-mark version of my story. I ended up also making a 12-mark, a 15-mark, and then I had from that base story that was 750, I also had a 1,000-word one just in case, because one of the HSC papers in advance had once asked to write a 20-mark creative and not do any reflection. That's just an example. But that's what I did to get around it. Now, obviously, you don't have to do that. For me, it wasn't that bad. Like, I tell people that, and they're like, oh, that's just so much memorizing. But it was still the same story. It was still the same character. I just know for the 1,000-word one, I added an extra flashback. And for my 500-word one, I took out a section. Like, but it's still the same story. Like, you're just adding and minusing when you need to. So that worked for me personally. I know my students all prefer different things. Some of them prefer to go in with like 2 stories. And when we do that, and if you are planning on doing that, my advice and what I always get my students to do is we'll have one story that's kind of light, kind of maybe ambiguous, just a bit different. And then realistically, we're going to talk a bit about trauma dumping because it happens and it's not as bad as the thing is made out to be, but you don't want to actually trauma dump. We're going to talk about it. But for the mod C, a lot of us write really sad stories. And my first story was so sad. Was about like isolation and depression, and I was like, why were you writing something so sad? And then my trial story, when I ended up writing something new, was actually a really nice like light story, and it was kind of like bittersweet, but it was like it still had, it was bitter, but it still had the sweet ending. So what I do for my students is I get them to have a piece that's kind of bittersweet or nice ending and then a sad one, That way that you can make sure naturally that the texts are pretty different because it's got a completely different atmosphere, and that's going to change the language entirely. But it also changes what kind of themes and human experiences you're looking at, um, which I think is really important. And they'll go in with the two, and then depending on the stimulus, they'll adapt. But we're going to go through them. So there's also the broad study of multiple texts that you guys do in a variety of forms. So that's your prescribed text. These are some of them. Guys, actually the only ones that I have studied that I know of are the fringe benefits of failure and the pedestrian. I'm looking at the others. Yeah, those are the two that I know. So if you do have any specific questions on those for the live chat, please let me know. I'm more than happy to add. Anyways, for audience impact, it's to describe the world around them. That's why you're writing a creative piece, to describe the world around you. It's to evoke emotion. It's to share a perspective, but it's also to share a vision. And you really have to get into that cap where it's like I'm a crafter of writing, and really just try to write as figuratively as you can and make it sound, if you are planning to do a creative. And of course, if you're planning to discursive, we'll talk about that one as well. Now, like I said, they can play with mark allocations and tricky questions, enforce other restrictions related to your prescribed text to see how you respond creatively. So let's look at these ones. Now, this one, 12 marker, and it has to end with the provided image. I wanted to show you guys this one because this is from the 2019 HSC, and a lot of people thought that you had to take this literally. Like your character physically had to end up in an alleyway with graffiti. That's not true though. And a it's not a mistake because it's not bad if you do this, and it's completely fine if your character does end up with it. But HSC markers have said, and what they say for the Band 6 students is that Band 6 students across standard and advanced are taking metaphorical approaches at it. So instead of just looking at this picture and thinking, oh, it's just like some street art, you can talk about the path and how it's narrow but it feels long. And there's obviously a journey to get there, but has your character taken the first step, or are they just frozen? And it's kind of like the metaphor of journeys and taking that step and discovery and self-growth. You could also talk about the unknown, and you don't really know what's next and what's at the end, like you can't really see. But is your character ready to go find out, or do they want to stay in their comfort zone? I know it sounds like waffling. That's because it is waffling. But all those metaphors give you more opportunity to talk about your text. So instead of thinking like, oh my gosh, I've got this really sweet story and now my character just has to randomly end up in some like street art alleyway. No, your text can still end about having to make a decision, having to honestly pick between two sides as well. See how there's the line down the middle and then there's two opposing sides, and it's like, well, where do you stand? It can definitely be something on conflict. It can be about appearance and reality. It can be something about art if you wanted to make it metaphorical. um it's up to you, and I'm not saying you can't talk about street art, and maybe you end up adding like street art to your text. That's completely fine, but it's just not the only thing that you can do, and you can take it metaphorically. And if you do take it metaphorically, not only do you open more opportunities to talk about and like link your story more, but you also it's kind of like brownie points for your marker, so we're a fan. They love setting the most random settings, so use the above image to write creatively about a character's response to entering this unfamiliar setting for the first time. For this one, this is good because all that you really have to change is just kind of adding a paragraph on the setting. Your entire story can take place here, but it's just about this setting, and what about this setting makes your character think, or that kind of um, gives you the exact one. Um, but yeah, that's all you can really do. Again, this is actually from a Nessa sample paper. This isn't from any past paper. They have never done anything like this. It is a bit strange, but I wanted to show you guys just in case, because if Nessa's put it in their sample papers, literally anything's possible. But if you did get this, you could still use the same character, still use the same story, but you'd probably have to cut out a paragraph from it and chop it out with the characters responding to entering the unfamiliar setting, and maybe they're sitting down and they bring someone with them, or they're on the phone, or whatever your story is. And then as they're doing that, you can just add a couple extra lines throughout the piece about the unfamiliar setting and how it's so outside the comfort zone, etc. Here we've got a 12 marker and an 8 marker. So we've got this one: I must go down to the seas again, to the lonely sea and the sky. a lie get or you can do a lie gets halfway around the world before the truth has a chance to get its pants on, which both of them are very imaginative lines, and it's very much how you take them. And maybe your story is about a lie and you've got some type of deceit or betrayal. If you get that, then that's perfect. Or maybe you've actually got something about the water or the ocean, or maybe you're just talking about um, loneliness or nature, and this is going to fit perfectly. Either one, it's just an example of how you can adapt it to the stimulus. Here we've got and this is what I mean when they can do this is cruel. So this was composed a piece of imaginative writing that is set in a significant place, so it has to have a specific setting. This from the 2020 paper, and again, 20 marks straight creative, no reflection. They don't even give you the option to write a discursive. It's just a creative. So if you are planning on doing a discursive, I do recommend just at least have a creative idea in the back of your head, just in case. Um, because you don't know what they can give you and you don't want to end up like this. And if you are going with creative, everyone's like, oh my gosh, what if they ask for a 20 mark discursive? They haven't done it yet. I can't say it's 0% chance, but it is pretty unlikely. A lot of schools actually dodge discursives because they don't want to teach their students and confuse them. Um, but yeah, in this case, you'd need a 1,000 word story, which is why I think that that technique that I was using, where I had the same story, but it was just a longer version, and I literally just added like a flashback and low key some extra trauma to her, that could make it a bit longer, and it works for me. But for this one, the stimulus is this is my world now, it can be yours too if you like. A place can soak through your skin like sweat and ooze in your heart and soul. Breathe it in and let me tell you a story. Now, you can actually talk about a story time, and like it can actually be like maybe like a parent telling their child their story. It doesn't tell you who it's talking to. Or you can do and you can make a whole kind of metaphor out of this story. It's a place can soak through your skin. And really that focus on place is why setting is so important in common mod. Now, sometimes you're asked to incorporate the stimulus in the response, and you can achieve this in many ways. So you can either straight away, like as soon as the text starts, bring up the stimulus, and make it very direct. And that also makes sure that you don't forget about it completely. You can do it in the middle, and you can kind of draft a block, which maybe like you have the stimulus, and then you fit it in the rest, or you can do it at the end. I feel like I always did it at the end, but looking back and just looking at how a lot of students perform, you're much better off doing it in the opening in the middle, because you don't want to like link to it too late and the whole time your mark is like, oh, where's the stimulus, and they're like, oh, it's there. You don't want that to happen. It's just not worth it. And it's just a bit risky. So I feel like it's definitely not bad, and I did it, and I still was really happy with my mod C marks doing that. But I think that for stimulus, incorporating it, especially word for word, don't ever put like the whole paragraph. Like, let's say you wanted to put in this stimulus, you could start it with this is my word now, comma, and add in your quote. Then not until the next paragraph you say breathe it in, I need to tell you, or like let me tell you a story, and just kind of splitting it up so it's not like, okay, let me just dump all of this here. um there's this one, I found something extraordinary in the ordinary. Use a statement as an ending line for a creative. So it actually ends on that, and it's a 20 mark creative. Um, so that's where sometimes you will have to subvert your story. Maybe if it's a bad ending, it has to be a happy ending, which is why I'm like, always just have different versions of your story. I had a version of my story that had a happy ending. I had a version with a sad ending. I had a version where you really love the protagonist, and I had one where you absolutely despise her and you like don't understand, and she's like an unlikable protagonist. And I just had different versions of the same piece, just so in case it wasn't going to fit the stimulus I had, even though I was going in with, because a lot of people like, oh, as if you only went in with one piece, but that one piece was so adaptable, and I had practiced adapting it. I had it planned out just in case. Now, this is part of just kind of an exemplar that you can read for language. The response actually ends with the stimulus, so I did not know it then, but I know now. I realize that I truly found something extraordinary in the ordinary. And yeah, that's just a way that you can bring it in. But it skillfully integrates not only the craft of writing, but also just the figurative language. I think if you're struggling with writing creatively, and if you keep getting advice that's like, oh, you're doing too much telling instead of showing, my best advice is to stop and go to Pinterest. Honestly, Pinterest was my best friend during year 12. And whenever I would write anything, and still to this day, because I have to do creative writing units for uni, because for some reason I decided to become an English teacher. Sorry, that sounds bad. I'm very happy with my course. I'm just not happy that I have to relearn Mod C. I was like, I thought we left this in year 12. Anyways, even in uni to this day, I still use Pinterest for inspiration. So if you're writing a story on disconnection, for example, go into Pinterest, search disconnection poems, and I promise you, you will find some of the most beautiful poems, so well written, and they'll just make you just feel inspired, and you can kind of set the standard. Of course, like these are very popular poets, and you're not going to expect it to go exactly to that quality and that level of value, but it's really just good um to just have that inspiration and just to kind of expose yourself. I know everyone's like, oh, just like read more. Trials is in 3 weeks. I don't have time to pick up 10 books and all of a sudden start reading, like, and really like fix up my creative flair. Like, definitely in the long term and working towards HSC, if you want to start reading more, it will help your writing. But figurative language, you can really get help from it by exposing yourself just to poems, I think, because they're really quick on the metaphors. You can also use a stimulus as a central idea. Um, and that's sometimes they can ask you about it, but you can just kind of brainstorm some words that associate with the stimulus and integrate it so you're making connections to it. And I think the most important thing is that if you think of the stimulus as kind of like the outline of the puzzle, and the bigger picture remains the same, but you have to design the way that the piece fit themselves and make it all fit. Is how the stimulus works. Like, it's completely up to you how you're going to fit it in, and you hold that power. But that's why having a broad piece to begin with is always just going to be the goal. Um, so let's say, using the provided stimulus as central idea, compose an opening, and it's got this stimulus of the light bulb here. And for this one, we've got the fear, and then it's linking it to the piece. Um, Now, this is a persuasive nature, and you can write a persuasive text. Now, I'm not actually sure, and I'll ask you guys on the live chat who's doing a creative and who's doing a discursive. You can do a persuasive, but it's not necessary, and it's not always assessed. While creative has been assessed 4 out of 4 times, so it is the safest option to do. Um, these are just some techniques that you can work through if you wanted to. I just wanted to put them for anyone that wants them. But it's just using logic, proof, and reason to create your judgments and then building on the credibility. But I just wanted to honestly put some stuff in here for you guys to have if anyone specifically was doing persuasive writing. Um, but persuasive obviously is very different to discursive. Guys, think back to NAPLAN. Seriously, when I was in year 12, I was like, I still don't know what a discursive was. I was like, wait a second. Persuasive, you're proving it, and you've got this predetermined argument, and you're like, this is what you're going to do, and you're going to believe me, and this is why I'm going to convince you. Discursive is like a discussion. And on a discussion, when we write discussions for NAPLAN, you might have like 2 points for, 2 points against. And then the audience is left to decide which one they want to have their stance on. So you're presenting multiple arguments and opinions. That's the difference with discursive. You can do an informative, but again, it's not always specified. I'm not very sure that anyone is planning on that. So personally, I'm going to slip this slide and this one. But in case you are thinking about it, it is an option. I've just never heard anyone say that they're considering it. Let's talk about reflective writing. So you can get a 10 marker, you can get an 8 marker, you never know what it's going to be. If it's going to be a 10 marker, you should be spending 20 minutes on your creative and 20 minutes on your reflection, because then you can hit the 40-minute timer. Do not rush your reflection, guys. Even if it's out of 5, it is very easy to get those marks there than it is to get full marks on the creative writing section. It is much, much easier, and I only say that because your reflection is kind of like a baby short answer. It's like a little short answer, except you're hyping yourself up. And it's like, this is why my work is good, and you get to write it completely in the first person, which makes it easy to write too. And you're kind of like, oh, my clever metaphor here, I skillfully utilized a simile here, and whatever. You would just continue. So this is an example of a reflection that you guys can use as a goal. Again, I wanted to just put stuff on here. Like, I'm not going to sit here and read the whole thing and bore you guys because I'm already talking so much. But this is more for anyone who's coming back to the lectures or who's downloading the slides if they want to be able to compare your reflection to someone else's and to just be able to look like, okay, what's an exemplar? What's mine at? What are they doing that I'm not? I think having others next to you is going to help a lot. Now, for constructing notes for Mod C, I definitely think that having some stuff on your prescribed text is so important, because if you get a reflection, and it is likely that you get one, is very likely that they ask you on your prescribed text. Now, for your prescribed text, all you really have to say is that um you are either going to be influenced by what your text is about. So let's say you're doing the pedestrian, it's very much about conformity and isolation, and your text is also in conformity and isolation, then you'd say conceptually I was inspired by it. But if you're inspired by like maybe the use of metaphors or the use of similes or the use of repetition, then you're going to say that you were inspired stylistically to use the technique. And you can use the same technique and have the same effect, like if it's like a condescending tone to warn readers of the dangers of something, and you also do a condescending tone to warn the readers of the dangers of something, you can do that and show similarity. Or you can say, although Rowling uses an anecdote here for this purpose, I used an anecdote to instead do this, and do like a different purpose of the technique. That's always a way that you can spice it up. Let's quickly talk about how to study for English. Creating and reading notes, guys, there is so much online, and I really do credit my marks in English to honestly reading other people's essays. Like, I don't care. I used other people's notes, and I read a lot of other people's essays, and when they had a really good line that I liked, like I would write it down, and I was like, this is really good, and I want to try and incorporate this type of stuff into my work. Obviously, I'm not going to sit here and say steal other people's things ever, but I think exposing yourself to exemplar work just can really help motivate yourself. I know sometimes it's overwhelming because you're like, oh my gosh, my work is never going to sound like this. But I promise you, the more that you read other people's work and expose yourself, but also exposing yourself to NESA feedback and the marker feedback and marking guidelines, it's just the goal. Writing thesis statements is so smart for you. I think if you are planning on memorizing an essay or going in with a draft and doing what I said that I did, writing thesis statement is killer, because your thesis statements, you can write them to so many different questions. They'll maybe take you 5 minutes each, and in doing that you can know, okay, this is how I'd answer that question. And if you struggle with it, then you can go back on it and you can ask your teacher about it, you can ask your friends about it, ask a sibling, whoever you can find about it. Writing essay plans is another thing. Essay plans really are just like your kind of like base essay, I guess, or like that draft essay that I said I did. And then writing full practice essays, again, you don't have to sit the full 2 hour plus paper, but if you wanted to, nothing's stopping you. Different way to structure your notes. You can do like just quotes, and I would do that. I had like 1 page of notes that was seriously just like a table of all my quotes and then the technique. Personally, notes weren't working for me in English. Like, I couldn't do those tables, and then having like notes on like all the themes and stuff just didn't really help me. For me, what always worked with note taking and like my English work was, I knew for common mod, mod A and mod B, that they're gonna ask me a 20-mark essay. That's all that they can, like that's all they're gonna give you. I knew that, so I was like, well, why am I gonna memorize dot points and memorize and try and study with notes when I know that it's gonna be assessed in this format? And that's why I studied with essays, and by writing a practice essay and then practicing that with so many different questions, that really helped as well. And you can also, like, your notes can be paragraphs, like your notes can be essays. That's completely fine. When I first started, and these were my T.S. Eliot ones for mod B, as I was going in class, I had like notes like this where they were kind of dot pointed, but then as I got towards trials and HSC, my notes were literally just essays. So when I walked into my trials, I had like a stapler of like my common mod essay, then another thing of my mod A, my mod B, and then a stapled copy of like my different mod C's, depending on what question, if it was 15 or 20 or 10 or 12, whatever it was that it was. So going into the HSC and trials, I think I had less than, I put the text small, I'll say it, but I think I had less than 15 pages of notes altogether, and I had all 4 modules. But that's only because I had worked on making a base that was so broad, and just so general because I had done a lot of module work as well. And I'm so sorry that I sit here like defining like this is what a human experience is at this early time in the morning, but it just can make such a difference in your marks, the module work. And it's just so often ignored, and it's such an easy way to get marks. And then before I would write my essay, I'd kind of do like these essay plans where I'd kind of map out my thesis, because it's really hard to just like sit there and write like a full essay. But if you have a plan and you're like, okay, these are the quotes I'm going to use, this is like my first body paragraph, this is my second, this is what I'm going to say in my conclusion, it can really just set up the goal for you. And then right before my HSC and right before my trials, I transformed them to paragraphs, and those paragraphs were really broad so I could fit them to a lot of things. So that's my advice. Again, up to you. You don't have to follow that. Personally, it worked for me, and I was just memorizing my quotes, techniques, analysis, and then my topic sentences and my thesis. But realistically, your thesis is going to be different for every single question. I was just really trying to practice with different type of thesis ideas. And this was some of my others, and I was just writing practice essays. Now for the common module unseen text section, the best thing you can do for yourself is practice. And honestly, for the entire paper, the best thing you can do for yourself is practicing as much as possible. It's also very helpful to make a list or table of those techniques, and I promise I will get on those as soon as I can and as soon as I'm finished up with all the lectures. But just knowing some good techniques and their effects is definitely the way to go. And the more practice questions you do for the common module unseen text, the less you'll get thrown off because you'll kind of be used to it. You kind of realize that a lot of the texts are really asking about the same general human experiences. Like it's very much about like discovery and growth and disconnection, human connection and nature. Like it all kind of flows into it in that way. Same for Mod C. I think the best way to prepare for it is to practice. I think if you like choose a topic or you choose like a plot or a character that you really like, and then try writing like a creative about it or try writing a discursive on it, it's up to you. Personally, I did not have a discursive planned. I had like an idea and I was like, you know what, like if they give a discursive, I'll write one. And I already had my idea and I was like, I'm going to write on this. And I think I wrote it once, like I wrote a first draft just to make sure I knew enough to write about it. But I was really confident with my creative writing by the end of it because I had worked a lot and just tried my best to get also as many people as possible to read it. I know it's horrifying to send your mod C to people. It's like so humbling to sit there and read it and be like, I'm gonna let other people see what a bad creative writer I am. But the more people that read it, and a lot of your friends can just give advice for what sounds cliche, what to fix. Jackpot when when you send it to someone and they like instead of just leaving like a comment and being like, oh, this sounds cliche, they put like comma, instead do this, and they say like even better ways that you can use your language. That is the jackpot. That is the absolute goal that we are aiming for. Now